motorcycle market has its default. Take the 1250 GS, for example, that we featured on the channel recently. You probably want to demo one of those first before you buy a large capacity adventure bike. That's the benchmark, and it lets you judge all the other bikes against it. So for the affordable middleweight nakeds, undoubtedly it's the MT-07. Yamaha have sold absolutely shed loads of these bikes, and for good reason. It's well priced, it's good looking, and the parallel twin that powers it has a reputation for being loads of fun. Even at this super competitive price point, they sell so many of them that it must be a great earner for Yamaha, and obviously Triumph have taken note of that. For 2021, they've tried to ruffle Yamaha's feathers with this, the Trident 660. It's a really good stab at this category of bikes, so much so that I bought one myself. Now that's not to say that this head-to-head or comparison is going to be biased. There are so many reasons for someone in my position making videos for YouTube to buy a bike. This is a new bike for this model year, so in terms of putting out videos that haven't been done before, it's the obvious choice. And I also have a street twin, so I've got a lot of Triumph fans subscribed to the channel, and it's going to be of interest to them as well. So what I'm saying is I'm going to come at this one with an unbiased perspective of how the two bikes ride on the road. I've already ridden my own Trident plenty, of course, and there are loads of videos about it, so I'll link to those in the description. My focus for today is how the MT-07 compares to it, so we'll go through the specs of this bike. I'll tell you what's new for 2021. We'll go through the Trident as well, but focus on where it differs from this bike. I'll take this for a decent spin. I've already recently ridden the XSR, so I know roughly what it's about, but I want to get a feel for those 2021 updates, and at the end I'll give you a few reasons to buy this, a few to buy this one as well. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Fowlers. Now it's a multi-brand dealership here. You've got Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, KTM, Kawasaki, Triumph, Zero, Husqvarna. I'm probably missing a few as well, but where else can you come and try all those different manufacturers of bikes in the same day? If you're thinking about a Trident versus an MT-07 versus a CB650R versus a Kawasaki Z650 versus a Suzuki SV650, you could feasibly come here and give them all a spin. It really is a brilliant place to come and try bikes, not just because of all the manufacturers, but we've got the Cotswolds, the Mendips, North Devon, South Wales. So if you want to try a bike and really give it a good test in the sort of environment where you can do your best riding, then this is it. I'll put the contact details for Yamaha and Triumph down in the description of this video, so don't hesitate to contact them. They'll set you up with a demo. So let's start with the MT-07. It's got a 689cc parallel twin. This CP2 engine has been used in all sorts of bikes, the Tracer 700, the Tenere 700, sort of middleweight adventure bike, the XSR 700, which is a retro take on the MT, and it's proven extremely popular in all of those bikes. I actually rode the XSR recently as a courtesy bike when I was having mine serviced here, and it was a good reminder of just how fun this engine can be, especially on the B roads that we've got around here. It's not massively powerful, about 72 horsepower at 8,750 RPM, 67 Newton meters of torque produced at 6,500 RPM, but it's just got a really playful nature. I think the fact that it basically has like no electronics apart from ABS, so there's no rider modes, no ride-by-wire throttle, no traction control. You know, it really does feel like a very direct connection with the engine, and I can't wait to take this one for a spin today. It also has a 270-degree crank, so that'll give it more character than something like Kawasaki's Z650. It gives it a bit of that V-twin feel, and it gives it a brilliant sound at the exhaust, and we'll listen to both bikes in a minute. As for the rest of the bike, you know, it's fairly basic, but it does the job. So you've got right way up suspension on the front there, non-adjustable, a preload adjustable shock at the rear. Again, simple stuff. Yamaha's own branded brakes. You've got a 4-pot caliper on the front there, and it does get a slightly bigger disc for this year, so it's on 298mm discs now. That should give it a little more stopping power. So again, looking forward to finding out how that feels on the road today. And another positive is you do get Michelin Road 5 tires. That's the same on both these bikes, but they're a really good choice for a little sporty road bike like these. One of the MT-07's key strengths is its wet weight, which is down at 184 kilograms. That's 5 kilos less than the Trident, so that's still a fairly lightweight bike, the Triumph, but the Yamaha certainly has the edge. And when you look at some of the other bikes in this market, take the CB650R for example, that's quite substantially heavier than both of these two. 805mm in the seat height, so nice and accessible, narrows to the middle here as well to help you get your legs down. A 14-litre fuel tank at the claimed consumption figures that Yamaha lists, you should get over 200 miles out of that. And then the price is the other key thing with this bike. So £6,902. So keep that in mind till we talk about the specs on the Trident, but you know, it's really competitively priced, especially when you look at what you're getting for your money. Now, I've talked about the specs of the Trident plenty of times, given that I own it and I've made plenty of videos about it, but it's worth going through the points of difference with the MT-07. The first of which being the 660cc inline triple engine. Triumph do like to talk about the fact that a triple offers a bit of a halfway house between the torquiness of a twin and the reviness of an inline four like the CB650R, and to be fair to them, it does play out in the performance specs. So this revs up more than the MT-07, and as such you get a bit more top end power. It's 80 horsepower up at 10,250 RPM, and yet at the same time it has almost as much torque, so 64 Newton meters to the 67 of that bike, and it produces that peak torque 250 RPM lower at 6,250. But you know, performance figures on paper aren't everything, and so that's why I'm excited to get this bike out on the road and see how it feels in comparison, having jumped off this bike today. That said, I'm expecting the Trident to feel a little more refined, where you've got that cross-plane or 270 crank that gives that roughness and growl to the MT-07. You've got even firing intervals on the triple on this bike, so it does have a bit of a smoother, silky feel compared to a parallel twin. And also you've got a slip assist clutch on this bike, so the slipper part of the clutch means that the rear wheel won't lock up under aggressive downshifts when you haven't rev matched properly. And then also the assist part pulls the clutch pack together under load, so that means they can use lighter springs, which leads to a lighter feel at the lever. In fact, there's not actually a great deal in it, so it's really the slipper part that I'd focus on as a benefit for the Trident. Now, Triumph do have a reputation of making great handling bikes, and on this one they fitted the best possible suspension realistically at this price point. So you've got 41mm upside down forks from Showa. They're non-adjustable like the MT-07, but you do get the benefits of those upside down forks. They're thicker at the top, so they should have better rigidity when it comes to braking and turning forces, and also the fact that there's less unsprung weight at the bottom should lead to more responsiveness, which should lead to a better ride quality. It also gets a Showa shock, and that's preload adjustable only, so preload adjustment allows you to dial in the sag of the bike. Let's say you've got a passenger on the back, you don't want the bike jacking up like a speedboat, so you can boost up the preload and make sure that it's sitting level, which means it'll handle properly. Same with the MT-07, although I do believe I misspoke when we were just talking about the specs of this bike. It does have rebound adjustment as well that allows you to dial in and tweak the responsiveness of the shock. So in terms of adjustability, the MT-07 has the edge on this one. Like I say, you get those 4-pot Yamaha calipers on 298mm discs on the MT-07. On the Trident you get Nissin 2-pot calipers on slightly bigger 310mm discs, so more pistons on the MT-07, slightly larger discs here, and I think you get braided brake lines on this bike as well. So again, I'm gonna have to ride the MT-07 to figure out which one brakes best. Good thing is they're on the same tires, like I say, the Michelin Road 5, so it should make for a good even comparison, and they're a great choice for this bike as well. One area in which the Trident clearly excels though is the electronics. So you've got this half LCD, half TFT dash. It's really punchy and visible, and it's one of my favorite features of the bike. So you've got your basic riding information at the top there, like revs, speed, gear position, but at the bottom with that TFT you've got more advanced functions like menus and changing the riding modes, trip meters, and if you do so wish to upgrade to the Bluetooth module accessory, that opens up so much functionality in that small TFT dash. So you can get navigation prompts, you can control a GoPro, you can control your Bluetooth headset with regards to calls and messages, as well as music, so you can stop, play and change the volume and pause and skip tracks. So this really is a far more fully featured bike in terms of electronics, especially if you fit that accessory module. That really puts it up there with far more expensive bikes in terms of features. As standard though, you still get 2 riding modes, so road and rain, and you get traction control, which you don't on the MT-07. If you're riding often in wet conditions, let's say you do a lot of commuting, and sometimes when you get unexpected rain you have to ride in the wet. If you're not feeling very confident in those conditions, then you might want to consider this one. So the rain mode is going to give you a bit less responsiveness on the throttle map, but also that traction control. Firstly, you know, you have traction control, so it prevents the rear wheel spinning up if you do give it a bit too much gas, but it's going to be keener in the rain mode as well. As for the dimensions, like I say, this bike is 189 kilograms wet, so 5 kilograms more than the MT-07. Not a huge amount, but it does claw back a little bit of that power to weight for the MT-07. And then you get the same 805mm seat height. Both of them are really accessible in that respect. There's a 14-litre tank on this bike as well. Triumph don't have an official consumption figure listed on their website for some reason, but I've been finding about 60 miles per gallon is doable on the motorway, so you'll probably get about 180 miles on a tank. It's really comparable with the two, and also the official specs on the Yamaha might be a little bit more favourable to Yamaha. Maybe if I can get an MT-07 on a bit more of a long-term loan, I can do a proper comparison, but I probably won't be doing 200 miles today. Then there's the price to consider as well. So the Trident is a touch more expensive at £7,295. That's for the two simple paint jobs in black and white. For this matte black version and the sort of grey silver with a similar large Triumph logo, you're looking at an extra 100 quid. Then if you add the Bluetooth module, which really does give it a big USP over the MT-07, you're looking at a bit more money as well. So I think that's definitely something to consider. If you're on a strict budget, the MT-07 might be the better choice. But also looking at those specs, there is a bit more functionality, a bit more premium spec on the Trident, and so for many people you could justify that extra cost for something that offers you a bit more in terms of features. But you know, buying a motorcycle isn't all about the maths and specs. They've got to look good as well. I think it really helps if you like the look of what you've got parked in the garage, and I think these two bikes really do offer something quite different. The Triumph is slightly retro. I mean, it's not as retro as something like a Bonneville, but there are certainly little cues there, like the round speedo, the round headlight, that give it more of a traditional look. Whereas the Yamaha, they've truly gone down their hyper modern route for this 2021 year model. And personally, I think it looks really good. I know the headlight for this bike and the MT-09 are a little bit controversial because they're so modern, but when you see it in the flesh, it really does look very good, especially with that DRL lit up down either side. I really like what they've done there. I'm also very fond of this paint job on the MT-07, so the orange wheels with the grey tank, I think it looks absolutely brilliant. And the good thing is they're all the same price, so 6,902, whether you go for this one, the black one, or the blue one. But you know, looks are totally subjective, so do let me know down in the comments which one you prefer. We should also have a little listen to the exhaust note as well while we're parked up here at Fowler's. So as you can hear, the 270-degree crank in the MT-07 really gives it that V-twinny growl, whereas the Trident has that distinctive raspy triple note. I think it could benefit more from an aftermarket exhaust. I'm working on that at the moment, but which one sounds best is really up to you. So let me know in the comments while I go and take this one for a spin. So you join me in the countryside now. I've been out on this for a couple of hours, really got to know it. There's a bit of GoPro footage with my mic in my helmet on my other channel, so I'll link to that in the description. But my conclusion after riding it is that there's not a great deal in it. They're both great bikes at a similar price point. The things that make the MT-07 stand out are certainly that parallel twin. It gives it a different flavour and character. It feels a bit more rough and growly and perhaps a little edgier, and you've got that very direct connection from the throttle to the engine. It just feels like a fun, simple bike to ride, and that's one of the defining differences between these two bikes. And one type of rider is going to prefer this and another's going to prefer the triple, but it's certainly something to focus on if you're going to demo these two bikes. I also thought the brakes were decent. I think they do have a bit more feel than the Trident. There's not a great deal in it in terms of the initial bite, but certainly as you apply the power, I thought I was getting a little more feedback from the MT-07. Other than that, I think it really just comes down to the price. You know, the MT-07 is that that bit more affordable. And then there's the looks as well. Super modern, super edgy. I think you're getting a lot of design for your money. You know, you don't feel like you're getting a poor relative of the MT-09 or MT-10. It really has genuinely got the look of the MT family, and I think it's quite a striking thing to look at. From a practical perspective, weirdly, I get a lot of questions about the Trident. Like, can you get a windscreen for it? Can you get a top box? What would it be like for that sort of weekends away or like short touring? I think this bike is the one that has the edge in terms of practicality and accessories. It's not something I'd normally cover in a review, but looking at the configurator for it, you can get an official windscreen, whereas the Trident's just a tiny shroud around the clock that won't deflect any wind at all. There is a top box accessory for this bike if you need it for practicality's sake. There is that option, whereas you can't get a top box on a Trident. There is also a low seat option for this bike. 805 mils, pretty low, but if you are super short in the leg, then the Trident, there's no option to lower it. You'd have to go for something like the Street Triple Low Edition, and that's going to cost you a bit more. For this bike though, there is a low seat option. So like I say, in terms of practical accessories, probably because it's been on the market longer and they've had chance to develop that stuff, this bike certainly has it. But you know, the thing that I'll take away from this ride and the thing that I'll remember about this bike is that lively engine, lots of fun, no electronics to detract from the experience. It looks great as well. It's a really nice package, and I think it's got a touch more comfort. It is softer in the suspension than the Trident. That might be a good thing for a lot of people who prefer a slightly cushy ride, especially if you're putting in a lot of commuting miles, which bikes like this, you know, they do a lot of that kind of riding. As for the Trident and where that bike excels, well, certainly if you like a triple, that versatility, a bit more reviness, then definitely have a look at it. It feels slightly more refined with a gentle first quarter turn of the throttle. It's really easy to ride on the throttle in town, even if you're on and off and closing the throttle, it doesn't feel jerky. It's really accessible in that way, and also the smoothness of the engine. Like I say, it feels more refined. You've got that slipper clutch, so less of a hooligan, let's say, even though it can deliver some thrills if you get on it a bit. Certainly the suspension is a little firmer on the Trident, and as such it feels tighter and more accurate through turns. The Trident as well, I've done loads of miles on mine and it's not super uncomfortable. It's a nice easy riding position, so there's just a slight bias towards comfort and handling between the two bikes. There is a pronounced difference in tech between the two bikes, but I think you really have to ask yourself whether you're going to use it. Honestly, after riding the Trident for the last couple of months, like, has the TC kicked in very often? Not really. Have I used rain mode even when it's raining? Not really. I just kind of ease off on the throttle a bit. Do I use the nav every ride and the media playback controls? I do like to have them, especially for like longer motorway rides, but I wouldn't say I use them all the time, and I could probably get by with mounting my phone on the bars. They're just nice to have, and it's really whether you think that they're worth that price difference. Like I always say, you're only going to know which bike is best for you if you get out and demo them. I'd really recommend Fowlers. Of course, like I say, you could probably demo these two bikes back to back if you give them a shout and schedule it in. So like I say, links are in the description. Hit them up. I'm sure they'll be happy to help.